highest it has been in 40 years. You know, for those of us that live in rural areas, our neighbors have to drive quite a ways to get to their place of employment. Gas prices mean something to those families. Groceries, if you go to the local grocery store, the costs are up significantly for those families. Our heating prices across Iowa right now, as winter is hitting us, they have skyrocketed. You know, families are making really tough decisions right now. The supply chain is broken. Over the weekend, I had folks in Red Oak telling me they've been working on a home improvement project, but so much of everything they need is on back order. So it's extending much, much longer than they had anticipated. And the costs of those goods have gone up significantly. Illegal border crossings are out of control. And there is no solution coming from this administration. I want to touch on Afghanistan, as some of our colleagues have done. Iowans are still thinking about Afghanistan. One of the young men that was killed in those final days grew up in my home community in Red Oak, Iowa. I personally know his family. They have not forgotten, and we should not forget either. It was a really horrible situation, and it left not only these families hurting, but so many veterans that are concerned about whether their efforts were worth it in the global war on terrorism. We can't forget. Our adversaries, if you just look at Russia and what's going on in Ukraine, adversaries are emboldened. China, as they're pushing up against Taiwan. I mean, I can't think of one area across the United States, whether it's the economy, our foreign affairs, what has not been touched as a failure by this administration. And folks, it's only been a year. And Iowans are really concerned about the next 3 years and what it is going to bring if President Biden doesn't pivot away from the radical left's agenda. We can't take much more of this, folks. My folks back home are upset. And I really hope that President Biden does the right thing and starts focusing on the issues that matter to all Americans and not just the radical agenda of the left.
So this last year has just been complete failed leadership. So think about it from a family. First, your gas prices are up $1.50. I mean, that impacts everybody. I grew up in a poor family. I watched my mom have to struggle. Do I put food on the table or put gas in the car? That's going on all across the country. Look at food prices. I met with some companies this last week, and their food prices, some of them have tripled. Then if you go to grocery stores in Florida, you have empty shelves. There's things you can't get now. And you look at the Biden administration. I have a grandson that this summer got in trouble, and he was saying, "Grandpa, I didn't do anything. I didn't do nothing." That's the Biden administration. There's nothing they do about anything. I mean, you saw the problems with the ships out the port of Long Beach. Where's the Biden administration? Nothing happened. Did they solve any regulations? Did they change anything? Did they show up? They don't show up to anything. They don't do anything. You look at our military. If you look at like a mom that has her son or daughter in the military, you look at the Biden administration. You think they're going to take care of them? If you're an American overseas, do you think Biden administration is going to take care of you? He lied. He said he was not going to let any Americans be left in Afghanistan. There's still Americans there. And they hide the ball. They won't tell us how many people came back from Afghanistan, how many Americans, how many people with special visas. They don't want the Americans to know. They don't trust Americans to have the facts. Then you look at Ukraine. Yesterday he said it was okay if there was a minor incursion. Well, we have to think about that. What's a minor incursion? 1,000 people died, 2,000 people died, 5,000 people died. That's a minor incursion? I mean, Biden is just, you look at him and you say, this guy has no ability to lead this country. And then you look at what we went through yesterday with the filibuster. The Democrats have decided they don't trust democracy. They're the anti-democracy party. They don't believe the American people can make good decisions. Chuck Schumer said it. He said, look, if we don't pass a bill like this that change the election laws, have a federalized election, Democrats can't win. So Biden needs to pivot. He's got to get away from representing the radical left. He's got to think of, how do I help the average American? What's the average American want? They don't want their gas prices up. They want food prices down. They want to be able to live. They don't want woke agenda at their schools. They don't want high crime. So he's got to start focusing on the things that help Americans.
Well, there are many things not to like about the Biden administration's policies in the first year, but I think the most egregious, the most misguided, the most self-destructive have been this administration's energy policies. Now, it's important to remember what the Biden administration inherited with regard to energy policies. Over 4 years of the Trump administration, and even beyond that, Republicans in control of the Senate, we finally achieved a decades-long bipartisan goal for the United States of America: energy independence. We were producing more oil than Saudi Arabia. We were producing more natural gas than Russia. We were the leader in producing renewables, all while dramatically reducing greenhouse gas emissions almost 15% since 2005, more than any major economy in the world. That's what President Biden inherited. Winston Churchill once said, "To build may have to be the slow and laborious task of years. To destroy can be the thoughtless act of a single day." And so this administration, in a thoughtless act and many actions, has sought to destroy American energy independence. How have they done that? By restricting the production of American energy. We see it everywhere. At the same time, they beg OPEC for more energy production. We're importing twice as much oil from Russia today as we were a year ago. By killing key infrastructure like the Keystone Pipeline, and then approving pipelines like Putin's pipeline, Nord Stream 2, and then by strong-arming American financial institutions with their climate czars like Gina McCarthy and John Kerry and their regulatory approach to not invest in American energy. It's crazy. So, what's the predictable result? You know it. You've heard it here. High energy prices for American working families, some of which they purposely are trying to hoist on Americans. Pink slip for American energy workers. Talk to the building trades, the unions, the great unions that build American energy infrastructure. And empowering adversaries like Putin who use energy as a weapon. I think it's safe to say that never in the field of American politics has a White House done so much, so quickly, to undermine American interests across so many areas. All for what? Zero benefit for the environment. We have the highest standards in the world on energy production. Come to my state, the great state of Alaska. It's simply to placate the far left, a theme you're hearing it time and time again. And one final thing on this. This is very personal to me and the great people of Alaska who I have the honor of representing. Why? We are ground zero for the Biden administration's war on American energy and working families. This administration has issued 21 executive orders and executive actions solely focused on Alaska. 21. My state is being crushed by these guys. Imagine a Republican administration coming in and issuing 21 executive orders and actions against puny little Delaware. If Joe Biden were still a senator, he'd be on the Senate floor raising hell every day. It's unbelievable what's happening in the great state of Alaska. The Alaska delegation has requested a meeting with the President of the United States, calling for a ceasefire on the war on American energy and Alaskan working families, but he needs to stop it across the board for the benefit of our country.
I think it's extremely important to understand that these failures, they didn't just happen. These failures are the direct result of Biden administration policies and Democrat governance. Inflation, a record for the last 40 years is 7%. COVID, with the vaccine, more deaths in 2021 than we had in 2020. The border, a record flow of illegal immigration. Afghanistan, the dangerous and humiliating surrender that's emboldened our enemies. Take a look at what's happening in Ukraine right now. And of course, crime, rising crime. Let me just hit on three of these. Inflation. As much as President Biden, as a candidate, promised he would never increase taxes on the middle class, inflation is the Democrat tax on the middle class, wiping out their wage gains. And again, it didn't just happen. $2 trillion of additional COVID relief, when we had $1 trillion unspent, a lot of that money being spent to pay people not to work, exacerbating our supply shortage. So there you go, way too many dollars chasing too few goods, and you got 7% inflation. The border. I couldn't believe yesterday in his press conference, President Biden said, it's just seasonal migration. Nothing has changed. No, he completely dismantled the successful policies of the previous administration. It's probably costing us more not to build the wall than to have completed it. He caused this flood of illegal immigration, and with it, the sex trafficking, the human trafficking, the drug trafficking, all the depredations that come along, the gangs, all those depredations come along with illegal flow. This was caused by President Biden's policies, Democrat governance. And I just have to quick talk about crime. Our current vice president urged people to donate to a fund to bail out the Minneapolis rioters. Well, in Wisconsin, we saw the result of that no bail, low bail policy of Democrat governance, particularly in Milwaukee, where they let out the murderer that turned a Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin into a slaughter. 6 innocents killed, more than 60 people injured because somebody was let out on bail, $1,000 bail, after he just run over the mother of his child shortly before that. So these policies have real consequences, and the American people are noticing it. Now, Congress's job is oversight. We should be able to get information to deliver to the American public. But this is what this administration is doing in terms of oversight. You request information, it takes months, if not years, to get it, and then this is what we get. Redacted documents that tell us nothing. So my final point is another comment that President Biden made. He said that he believes his administration was exceeding expectations. What alternate reality is he living in? All I can say is here on planet Earth, his administration, his policies have been a miserable failure. I guess the only expectations he's exceeded is I don't think anybody expected Democrat governance and the Biden administration policies to be this disastrous.
We've all been critical of the Biden administration not doing enough to get them out there, giving us numbers, giving us names, who is there, what can we do to help. All of us have trying to work through the State Department to get them out. Remember, the president said he would leave no one behind. The troops wouldn't come out until all the civilians were out. That just did not happen. It was another one of President Biden misleading the country, which is why his role in Afghanistan, 62% of the Americans really do not approve of what he did there. Well, Senator Shelby is working from the Republican standpoint with Senator Leahy on making sure that we can get the government continued to stay open and funded. Yeah.
Senator, Leader McConnell said yesterday that Republicans don't plan Is there any risk in not providing an agenda going into the midterms? Two of you are running for re-election, or just decided that you're going to run for re-election. Is there any risk in not having an agenda when you're running?
You want to?
I'd love to answer it. The agenda is pretty simple. We know what works. It worked under the last administration. We stopped adding to the regulatory burden. This administration is putting the regulatory agencies into hyperdrive. And you make sure you maintain a reasonable and a competitive tax system. And you then respect the American public to do what they do a great job of. They innovate, they create, they dream, and they aspire with the freedom that our government should be protecting, but that is right now being frittered away. So again, I think the Republican agenda is quite clear. We don't have to specify everything, but we're for letting the American people live their lives with the less amount of government interference as possible, but lower regulation, a competitive tax system, and let Americans be Americans and make this country great.
Well, I would just say very quickly, someone who's running, I speak for myself, not necessarily for the conference on this, but it is going to be a referendum on this administration's policies. I think that's what midterm elections typically are. But with respect to what I think we ought to be talking about, I think it's the things I mentioned. It's the economy. It's the high cost of everything right now, which has been exacerbated, complicated by a lot of wasteful spending. So stop the wasteful spending. I would make the 2017 tax cuts permanent to make sure that there's predictability, stability out there when it comes to people who are deciding about where to invest money and create jobs and better wages for people in this country. I would have an energy policy that doesn't obsess with electric vehicles and actually focuses on American energy independence instead of having to go hat in hand to the Saudis or the Middle East or someplace to get energy which we can produce in this country, and we know it until it would have been shut down by this administration. I would get Trade Promotion Authority going up here and pass so that we can isolate China in the Asian Pacific when it comes to trading and develop some of our allies in the region. And I would do something in the area of big tech. I mean, we have several bipartisan bills that create greater accountability, greater transparency on some of those issues. And of course, that kind of harkens back to my days as chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee. But I think there are a whole range of things that Republicans can be proactive about. And yes, opposed to this administration and this Democrat majority's policies here, which have been disastrous, but also talk about those things that the Republicans would do that would help improve and provide a brighter and safer and more prosperous future for the American people. And a lot of that is focusing on all the things that have been mentioned today.
I'll just add to that very quickly what John said, which is stopping what they're doing, and then, yes, providing an alternative. And we've done that. Let me give you one specific area where we've done that. On defense. The President put forward a budget to cut defense spending. It was supported by Schumer, Pelosi, the budget chairman, Bernie Sanders, and we collectively came together and said, no, that's not what the American people want. That's not what the American people need. And that was a huge rebuke. Passage of the NDAA by big bipartisan majorities was a direct rebuke to the Biden administration's vision for defense. And by the way, the leadership in the halls of Congress on the Democratic side. If you looked at what the House put forward in their NDAA and what we put forward in ours and what came out, we rejected almost all the far left craziness that they put in their defense bill. So stop their far left focus and put forward what the American people want, which on this one was strong defense, and we did that. And then I would just say on energy, stop that madness, as I just mentioned, and a number of us have put forward a very detailed plan that builds on the positive aspects of American energy independence. It's a no-brainer. That's been a bipartisan goal of American policy for decades, and they just have sought to destroy it with no real reason. So I think those are two areas. We're doing it already.
Yeah, Senator Risch and Senator Menendez are talking together. You know, you take a look at what Democrats voted for not that long ago, which were the sanctions against Nord Stream 2, stopping the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You take a look at what Tony Blinken said in his confirmation hearings in the United States Senate, opposing the Nord Stream 2 pipelines. And then Joe Biden, I mean, you talk about the hypocrisy. He comes up here then to get Democrats to filibuster. He wants to get rid of the filibuster, but use the filibuster to block what Ted Cruz and I and a number of us have proposed, which is bipartisan, but didn't get the 60 votes on blocking the Nord Stream 2 pipeline at a point, as Senator Sullivan said, kill the Keystone XL pipeline, but allows the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to go on. Now, Senator Menendez's bill says they got to stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline only after an invasion occurs. And I think, look, that's not a deterrent. That's kind of a punishment for bad behavior. We need to stop it now to deter Russia from going further.
John, can I just add?
Sure.
I think one other area of bipartisan agreement that I've been talking to a number of senators on is getting the Ukrainians more weapon systems. Not just the Javelin, but anti-ship systems, anti-aircraft systems. And I think there's a number of us who are very interested in that on both sides of the aisle, trying to push the State Department to get on that much more quickly. But that's an area, in addition to sanctions, working with our NATO allies. You probably saw a number of our NATO allies are actually trying to get shipments of these kind of weapons to the Ukrainians. But that's another area that can happen quickly, and a number of us are pressing the State Department in particular to approve that much more rapidly.
Well, there's a bipartisan group working on that. Mitt Romney's part of it, Susan Collins, I think Joe Manchin is part of it. And you can talk with them. I think they're going to have a meeting next week on that specific thing, and it is bipartisan. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
We've heard criticism of the Biden administration's COVID policies, the current Omicron wave, there's higher deaths, hospitalizations for the unvaccinated. How do you respond to Democrats who say Republicans are to blame for fighting the Biden administration, test their vaccine mandates, whose goal was to get more Americans vaccinated?
Well, number one, I'm a doctor. I'm fully vaccinated, and my wife, our family, had the additional booster shot. I believe in vaccines. I oppose the mandate. I think that it is a huge overreach by government, that the government doesn't have a right to come into your home and tell you you need to have a vaccine. That's for you to decide, talking with your healthcare providers and others, and making that decision for you and your family. The Biden administration spent an awful lot of money in March and under the name of COVID relief. But you know, the more people have died of COVID under the Biden administration than over the previous administration. People fact check that. That can't be right. Well, it is right. And that happened actually sometime last year. So we want to get this behind us. Joe Biden ran for president saying he was going to put it behind us. He failed woefully. They failed in testing. They failed in treatment. He was so fixated, had tunnel vision on the mandate, that he ignored the real needs, which are the testing and the treatment for people that did test positive. Anyway, I think it's like the last question. Thank you.
President Trump has criticized the question of legitimacy of the last election. And then yesterday, President Biden said that the midterms could be illegitimate. What did he say? Could be illegitimate. What message does it show the American people that the last two presidents could question the legitimacy of our election?
When I look at what Joe Biden said yesterday, that says he's a guy that knows he's going to get beaten badly. Knows he's going to lose the House, lose the Senate, and he just wants to say, don't blame me. It was the system itself. I know what people are asking for in Wyoming: ballot integrity, ballot accountability, ballot security, and that's done best when the states run their own elections and have voter ID, not when Washington has a big bill like they tried to pass in the United States Senate by the Democrats, removing voter ID. The president's spokeswoman was on television this morning saying people need more drop boxes for their ballots. You know, there are mailboxes all over the country. There are post offices everywhere. Mail-in ballots exist, and it's a lot easier to vote, certainly in Wyoming or in Georgia, than it is in President Biden's home state of Delaware or Chuck Schumer's home state of New York. And they ought to try to clean up what's going on in their states before they start pointing fingers at other states. Thanks so much.